50% better staff retention. They're all missing the power of diversity. It's time to think differently. Diversity isn't just a nice to have, it's a must have. Harness the full spectrum of human potential. Reflect the markets you serve. Create greater value with better values. Because when we embrace diversity, we don't just build better businesses. We build a better world.
Yeah. Hi there. Great to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us at our second and final session in our Diversity for Tech related summit. We are so delighted that you all have taken the time out of your morning to make sure that you get a chance to come and listen about this incredibly important topic. My name is Mary Clark. I'm with a company called Numerical, and I'm a part of an organization that we protect calls that are made in the United States. But that's my day job. The thing that I love to do is to be a part of this summit, which I get to do and have been doing since it was 2016, which I'm really thrilled about. I'm going to introduce the primary moderator for this particular session. This session is all about how do we pull in more youth, more women into STEM. But really what it's about is building that pipeline. We've got to have more diverse youth in our pipeline so that by the time I'm retiring. We've got people that are ready to go and come in. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Please join me in welcoming Wini Hebalkar, who is the head of SquareTrade. I'm going to get it eventually. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage and the rest of the panel. Thank you. I'll get it.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here and great to introduce our panel. As Mary described, we're really about trying to make sure that we get a consistent pipeline of youth and women in STEM and keep them there. I think it's really important to make sure that we're not just getting them into the pipeline and getting them excited, but also making sure we are deliberately taking action to keep them there. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists. I'll start with Avanti Sharma. Avanti's an inspiring young leader who calls herself a preteen specialist, but is really the head of business development for Workshop for Me. She'll talk a little bit about Workshop for Me as we sort of dive into the discussion portion of it. But I think what's important is that she has been very active in advocacy for preteens and teens in technology and helping start them early in the pipeline. And I think that's really important and key here. Avanti has been recognized for her work in several different forums. She represents Luxembourg and the EU as a delegate in various forums as well around the world, specifically in technology and STEM-related activities. I'll have her introduce herself in a bit and Workshop for Me and what they're doing. But I'd also like to welcome on stage Claire Thorne. Dr. Claire Thorne, as she asked me not to call her, is the co-CEO of Tech She Can, which is a charity based in the UK that's focused on bridging industry, policy, and education to really close the tech skills gap. She herself is a passionate advocate for social justice, inclusion, and women in STEM, and has extensive experience in innovation and bringing really technology to life. So not only is her day job very much in the technology space, but she's very, very passionate about bringing others along on the journey. Our next panelist is Katherine Ainley, who is the CEO of Ericsson for the UK and Ireland. Katherine leads the mobile network and telecom industry specialty within Ericsson and is super passionate about making sure that technology is both accessible to everybody as well as making sure the industries are a great place for women in tech and is very diverse and inclusive. And most importantly, Katherine is also involved in championing a number of initiatives within Ericsson and within the industry around bringing in the diverse pipeline that we're really talking about today. And finally, Dr. Alessandra Sala, who is the Senior Director of AI and Data Science at Shutterstock. She's also super passionate about commercializing innovation and really talking about analytics in this space. Among other things, outside of her day jobs, she serves as the co-chair for the UNESCO Women for Ethical AI Platforms, and is also the global president of Women in AI, which is a nonprofit that's really geared towards making sure that gender-inclusive AI is being developed by everybody. Finally, every one of our panelists has been recognized with several awards, but the most recent one that Alessandra won was the Grace Hopper Award for Diversity in Tech. So welcome to our panelists. We're going to jump right in to our discussion. I think what's important really is to make sure that we're setting the stage for why we're here. So we're at MWC, which is one of the world's leading tech conferences. Everybody's been talking about AI. It's an exciting place to be. The reality, though, is that we don't really have enough youth and women who are aspiring to enter technical fields and STEM fields. And as AI continues to challenge us and really change the way our work evolves, it's really important to continue to bridge the digital skills gap. So part of what we're going to talk about today is really thinking through how do we continue to encourage, inspire young people, especially girls, to start careers in STEM. But then, most importantly, as we go through the journey, how do we keep them in the pipeline? It becomes really important to make sure that we are not just encouraging them to start careers, but to keep them in the pipeline. Just a few stats, just to get us grounded, right? The reality today is that if you look around the world, women have made tremendous progress just in their representation and leadership in leadership roles. Work's not done, though. We're still at about a quarter of the workforce being women in tech. And if you start looking at leadership roles, we're talking about less than 20%, right? If you start looking at women in technology leadership role, the numbers are really, really stark. We're talking about single digits. So really important for us to make sure that we recognize the real challenge that we have, as well as do something about it. This is all about actionable strategies. So each one of our panelists is going to talk about what they are doing and help inspire us to do the same in our work. Let's begin maybe with Avanti. Avanti, one of the things that you're very passionate about is making sure that we create awareness as well as opportunity for youth and girls to build skills. So tell us a little bit about Workshop for Me and the work that you've been doing and how you're really trying to inspire women to pursue STEM careers.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind introduction. So Workshop for Me is a nonprofit organization founded and based in Luxembourg, where we kind of want to move young children to become the leaders of their future through teaching them programming and other technology-related skills. So we have quite a young demographic. We start 6, go all the way up to 16 years. And we believe in, as someone who represents this organization, I really do think that if we start young and if we start from now, we really have a great chance of trying to address those numbers which you just mentioned. And as you already said, it's a huge and it's kind of a shock when you hear this, is that you think a lot of work has been done and it's actually doubled over the past 20 years. And if it's doubled and it's still at 25%, we see how much work still has to be done and how the pace has to pick up much faster. So what we're doing at Workshop for Me is 2 things. The first is we're showing young people, and notably girls, to understand that there is an opportunity and there is a space in this field which exists for them. Right now, if we look around and we see all of the systems which are around a young iGen, we see that they have kind of 3 fronts which they can be influenced with. The first is their peers, the people who are around them. Then there's their family, and then there's their school. And unfortunately today, because of the statistics we saw, each of these 3 pillars are continuously failing. And they end up deciding that STEM is not for them, they don't fit in, they don't belong, or they're simply not good enough. And on this point of not being good enough, I want to talk about something which we're seeing around the world today, and that's the meritocracy-based shift which we're seeing. So I was in MWC, and just on Monday I was reading Financial Times in the lounge. It's great. And you can see that they have a whole article dedicated to, can businesses ever run a true meritocracy? So this is a very interesting question being asked right now. I mean, for a lot of us, it's flabbergasting, it's startling. But I think what we have to understand is the world is changing, but we have to make sure that women and youth are in the forefront of this change. And to do that, we need to ensure that all of the systems around the girls are set so that they feel at least that this is an option open for them. And that's what we do in Workshop for Me. We not only teach them technical skills about tech, like coding, entrepreneurship, and pitching skills, but we also show them that there's an opportunity here for you. And that's why I'm actually representing this organization in MWC here today. So thank you so much for welcoming me, and thank you, Wini, for this.
Thank you, Avanti. Claire, you have a very similar story with Tech She Can, but I think you take a little bit of a different approach to thinking through closing what you call the inspiration and aspiration gap. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, will do, Winnie. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. So yeah, I think on paper you may think that the charity that's UK headquartered but has global reach, Tech She Can, looks very similar to Workshop for Me, potentially from an industry partner perspective. Actually, there's a lot of common themes. The principles, the values, the mission is all very similar, but the way we go about it there's a slight nuance. So Tech She Can was born out of a piece of research done in 2018, done at PwC in the UK, to look at the gender balance or imbalance in tech. And obviously, it was quite shocking what they found. And then there was a movement that followed about how can we bring industry together to really tackle this and close this. Tech She Can as a charity formed 3.5 years ago in 2021. And what we don't do is teach practical tech skills and coding. So there's one slight difference, because there's so many great organizations that do that stuff. But what we do is the inspiration and the aspiration and the access and the belonging piece. So we are fully funded by industry, and not just big tech, not just tech, across all sectors. So 40 sectors back us: Unilever, Tesco, banks, utilities, Centrica, etc. And we show boys and girls and teachers, everything we do for schools is free. We show them what technology careers exist. I mean, it's really quite simple. It's not rocket science. These roles are invisible to students and to teachers, many of whom are vocational in training. They've been in the education system for maybe 20, 30 years. They do not know, and we cannot expect them to know, what an emerging tech lab in Deutsche Bank looks like, for instance. So our job is to show the girls, the boys, and the teachers what those roles are. We link their passions to technology careers. So we say, what is it you love? Is it dance, drama, sport, art? Whatever your passion is, there is a role in technology for you. And we showcase predominantly women, but not only women, early stage career, because they're relatable, early stage career role models. So we actively place those champions, that we call them, from industry into classrooms across the UK. We do all of this in a couple of different ways. So we do the kind of the broad piece, the reach piece, where we host live assemblies, simple Teams links for teachers and their classes, or sometimes whole year groups or whole schools to log into from around the world. So these live assemblies are on things like tech for AI, tech for cyber, tech for cashless payments, tech for navigation, tech for communication, and they're all linked to the curriculum. So there's learning outcomes for those teachers that are embedded. We did one a couple of weeks ago for Safer Internet Day on cyber, sponsored by the RAF, the Royal Air Force in the UK, and we had 60,000 children on one live assembly. So the demand we're seeing from schools for industry relevant, modern, inclusive, and inspirational careers education is huge. And as a small but fast-growing charity, we're racing to keep up. So that's our kind of breadth piece. We also do depth, where we try and set particularly girls on individual paths. So we host Career Insight Days at our industry partner offices, and we bring those girls in. Sometimes they may be 20, 30 minutes away and they're secondary school age and they have never been into their city centre before. Sometimes we have to coach them to get into a lift during those days because they've never been into a lift before. And these are children, young adults almost, that the industry workforce, the pipeline, is expecting in 5 or 10 or 15 years to enter into their pipeline. And it's just not going to happen. They don't know these roles exist. They say to us things like, oh, what you mean, miss, Google isn't just a box on a screen. We're like, no. There's a whole world out there. So, but yeah, we start young. We start from age 5 and go all the way through to 16 because we know those harmful gender stereotypes set in before primary school. Yeah.
So obviously, both of you work very closely in the early stages of the pipeline to get people in, young people who want to make tech and STEM careers. But I think Katherine and Alessandra take a focus really on the later stages of the pipeline, right? Once they're in the field, how do we keep them there? It's incredibly hard with the societal challenges and with the pressures on their lives and their times to keep women excited about building careers and aspiring to be leaders in tech. So Katherine, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with Ericsson, within Ericsson, and also just generally within the ecosystem.
Thank you. So hi everyone. So yeah, I look after Ericsson in the UK and Ireland. It's a couple of thousand people, and we're really passionate about diversity and inclusion of all types, because actually we think that's what makes it a great place to work, and also you get the best. The best outcomes, the best involvement, and we have, the most fun whilst delivering the best things for our customers. I'm also at home. I'm the mum to 2 daughters who fit exactly in this age range, so double passionate about it. So I've got one daughter who's 12 who is super into STEM, one daughter who's 15 who a little bit less so. She's keener on animals, horses, and anything outdoors. So, but they've both gone on this journey. So I've sort of also seen firsthand how do you gently shepherd and what are the distractions along the way. So what kind of things do we do? I sort of break this down into a number of phases. I mean, I think the first one, as you say, is about how do you inspire young people, and we run a number of activities. We go out to schools, so we have a volunteering program, and then we have quite an established STEM in schools program where we go out and we run assemblies and we talk about what we do. So you can see role models and you can sort of bring it to life. So that's the first thing that we do. And some of those, I went to one early on after I'd started at Ericsson, and there were like 100 people and there was one female. Yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is why we need to be here. So, there's definitely a need for it. Then I look at how do we recruit and how do we make sure we've got really good diversity? How do we keep people? And how do we make sure people are getting promoted on the, going for the right jobs and then getting the jobs because they're great at it. But, making sure that they're getting the right development and then, having the right opportunities. So lots of different areas. I could talk for ages, but I will stop there.
No, and it's amazing. I'm just picking up and continuing those activities that are so critical. I was just talking with some of you before, and one of the things that I was asked early on in my career was, Ale, can you bring more women like you? And I was young, and I thought, I should find more women. Yeah, but we cannot create pipelines of amazing women candidates if we have done nothing to create that pipeline. So I'm located in Ireland after 13 years with Bell Labs, so I share very much my passion in this industry, even though if today I'm in the web players. And we started education programs at master level. So the first National AI Master we designed in Ireland was launched a few years ago, and yet we realized not many women between 30 and 40 have the right time to study every night and spend for only 2 years every weekend doing homeworks with kids and a husband and a career. It's maybe a little bit too much. So I went back to the government and I said, can we create a smaller program, a 3-month program, that can help women to get the basic skills to enter the workforce, and then we keep evolving them. So in collaboration with Women in AI, which is a non-profit organization, we have UK, Ireland, and 171 other countries around the world. We are helping women to see that there are upskilling opportunities to enter a technological world. But it's not enough. So with UNESCO, the Women for Ethical AI, and I have some of my amazing women colleagues here taking part of this network, we have realized that we also need to work in better understanding our social norms and how we create example and break some of those heritage that we have in us that are impeding women to succeed. How do we work with policymakers to help that those social norms can be redefined, can be broadened up to be more inclusive? Because we do need inclusivity. We see the value of inclusivity when we have teams that are diverse in our workforce. I have 2 employees from Africa in Ireland, along with so many other parts of Europe and Asia and US. And sometimes the question that they ask when we analyze the data that we use to train those big models are just so amazing. And I say, how did you think about that? And I say, no, but because when I did these things, and they just bring their life in, they bring their experience, the way they have grown up, the way they have interacted with other colleagues and people in their country, it just brings that different perspective, which is so critical. So connecting the threads from young to adult and bringing it to policymaker to understand what do we need to change in our norm and how we support companies to actually hire more women and with diversity, even is the word that we cannot say those days, but we want the best workforce ever.
Yeah, I think it's really critical for us to make sure that our workforce and our academic curriculum represent society, right? And women make up about half of society, but we're not represented, especially in STEM fields, in any of these areas, whether it's secondary school, university, research institutions, certainly not in corporations yet. Yeah. To all the panelists, if you think about one of the biggest challenges that women face, what would you say is the one thing that we must figure out how to break the cycle on?
Okay. So this is, I think, a really important question, because if we look at the trend for the last 20 years, it's a systematic thing. We have systematically not had enough women in STEM. So this is a great question, and it's very important for us to talk about. For me, what I think it is I think that we have to show young girls and women when they're 5, 6, as Claire talked about, and I completely agree with this, that look, there is an opportunity for you here, but more than that, what they can become if they do study and they get into a STEM field. I think that as girls and as women, we often want to do things to help people. We want to see that our work makes an impact in everyday things, and that's why a lot of women right now choose another profession where you can instantly connect. Okay, I can instantly see what this does, right? The thing with STEM is often it's like a little bit of a maze game. It's a bit zigzaggy wave. You don't really know where it ends up. But I'm gonna say with an 80% surety that if you take a young 5, 6-year-old here and you show them these amazing panelists, which I have on stage speaking, and you're like, you know what? You can be that person, and you can be on stage, and you can be having meetings all day, and you can be your own boss. I think that they're going to be so much more encouraged to want to get into this and be like, I want to do this. And I'm going to give you an anecdote, which actually I had and I faced. I was at a conference around 2 years ago, and I had the amazing opportunity to speak to 200 plus young girls, and they were between the ages of 8 all the way up to 13. And at the end of the session, we had a bit of a Q&A, and one of them asked me, okay, Avanti, what do I have to study to do what you're doing right now? And I was like, this is a really important question. And I mean, I obviously encourage all of them to get into STEM, just to keep all of their options open. And obviously, if something else is their passion, they should follow their passion. But I think it's important to know, one, STEM is a passion, and two, what will you actually end up with if you study STEM? Because connecting this profession to something which is actually making an impact in the world is I think one of the most powerful things which we can use to lure more of the younger generation into it.
Claire.
I can as well. I think one of the big barriers is scale, really. And even just in the UK, let alone across Europe and more broadly, there are so many regional disparities. At Tech She Can, as a charity, we have not just a gender lens and a focus on closing the tech skills gap, but a social mobility lens as well. So everything we do, we go where the children, with our in-person activities, we go where the children need us the most. And I think the way to achieve and to make these roles visible to all children everywhere is a real question of scale. There are so many initiatives within every industry organisation that's here today, in all of your organisations, probably doing some schools outreach, probably doing a bit of CSR, a bit of mentoring. But actually, what is the one big thing that's going to make a difference? Who can you partner with that's already doing this? That means instead of reaching 10,000 children, you work with somebody like us, we reach 500,000. So I think scale and access for everybody, opportunity for all, is a really big thing. I think my background is in physics a long time ago. 20 years ago, I sat at an Institute of Physics, so a Learned Society roundtable, as then a postgraduate. And they were asking me, and they rounded up all of the female physicists in the department at the time, which took about 3 minutes. And they said, how do we stop this issue around attraction through STEM pathways, and then also retention post-PhD? And the problem is that was a conversation 20 years ago, and these roundtables are still happening. And the answers are not complex. The answers are partner with organisations that are already doing this, make these roles really visible. The thing that I always think about is when you're in these spaces, obviously MWC is incredible, but just imagine, little thought experiment, imagine for a minute if this whole exhibition space was filled with school children. They would have access to main stage speakers. They would see real life tech being demoed. And this is the sort of thing that we're always really interested in doing, is challenging those perceptions, bringing those roles to life. After MWC this week, I fly back to the UK, to the north of England, where in Manchester, with one of our partners, Accenture, we're hosting the UK's first inclusive AI summit. And this is for 300 12-year-old secondary school girls, all from very low socioeconomic backgrounds, really deprived areas across Manchester, at no cost to the schools. They will hear from OpenAI, NVIDIA, DeepMind, Mindstone. They will meet relatable role models in tech zones and exhibition spaces. And at the end of the day, they all come away feeling like, actually, this is a space for me. But when they arrive, they don't know what AI is, but beyond what they may have heard about on TikTok. And so there are really simple changes that conference hosts, industry organisations, I think, can do. And I think it's really around sustaining that commitment, starting young, but sticking with that cohort. So not just having a one-off employer engagement with that school group, but sticking with them throughout all of their schooling.
I think you bring up a really good point, Claire, in that, we're still having these conversations 20 years later. Nothing's really changed. So let's talk about industry and what we can do, right? I mean, bringing school-age children or university kids to an event like MWC, such an amazing opportunity for them to actually see it in action. What are some other things that you've seen, Katherine and Alessandra, that, has been necessary, but at the same time, really innovative in the way industry is bringing these ideas to the people that need to see it and hear it?
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I think for me, the most important thing is being conscious of it and actually being aware of, there's a big sort of piece about your leadership dynamic and that kind of people presence around you. So then it becomes quite purposeful in everything that you do. And actually, back to the point about diversity more widely, actually, thinking about the composition of your team and the people that you're bringing in, and do they represent the groups across society? Do they represent who you want to be as an organisation? Just super, super important. And then from that, I think it sort of snowballs into lots of other activities. I mean, when we go out to schools, for example, actually we then have people who are really passionate about what they do, just talking about it. And that role modelling is really, really important. But we've made a very conscious decision around our graduates and the young people that we bring in to the organisation to look at the diversity, who they are, and make sure we've got a really broad group of people, even though quite a lot of those roles are, say, field roles where typically they wouldn't have been super attractive. And then I think at the other end as well, and we were talking about this just before we came on, I don't have a technical background, but I sort of say, well, if you look back 50 years, 40 years, lots of the people who are currently in big technical senior jobs, whatever they studied is probably almost entirely irrelevant right now. So whatever they did, I don't know, some form of programming from 40 years ago, guaranteed they don't do that now. So everybody's going to go on a development journey. So yes, it's important you have a STEM background where you can, but actually there's also loads of roles where the world is changing, actually your ability to learn and absorb is much more, and your ability to understand the impact that technology has is the single most important thing, because it's all going to keep changing.
Yeah. I like to go back to the gaps that we face and the barriers that we face. I agree with everything that has been said, so I'm not repeating. I'm just doubling down on the dream gaps. Yeah. The language we speak to our girls, the behavior that we have towards our girls. Be careful. And the boy, just run, do it, break it. So behavior and language towards girls and boys is different, which does have an impact on their dreams, or what they can become, how much they can try, how much they can push it. The other thing that we need to realize is the time limits that we have and the mental overload. So just do a simple experiment for 1 week. Get out of the house. Traveling for work, like Mobile World Congress, is an amazing experience. Leave everything that you do every day to your counterpart. And that's the only way they realize how much we take every day from an organizational perspective, from a mental load, organizing everything, which also means that we are human. We have limited cognitive capacity. We have a little bit less to dedicate to be more aggressive in our jobs and so on. For example, in the scientific community, one thing that already from few years has been done, in conferences, there are crash. So mothers with young kids are not just excluded by default. Oh no, this year you cannot go to Mobile World Congress. You have a small kid. No, but there is a crash. I can go because every morning I go in, I leave my baby there, I do my day of work at Mobile World Congress, and as I finish, I pick up my kids and I go back. And in scientific conference, this is already a reality today. In industrial conference, not much, but is creating this gap of 250 men at Mobile World Congress versus every woman that is here. And many of you are here, so I wonder how does those all look like now, right? So time and cognitive overload is still something that we need to think more systematically to enable more women to participate.
If I can, on that, I think your point around language, I think is really important. Language and representation, they both matter so much in our everyday, in the young people in our lives. It could be, a neighbour, a niece or nephew, or your own child, or maybe you don't have them, but somebody around you. So one of the questions we ask a lot at Tech She Can, or I ask a lot, is where are the godmothers of AI? And, you know, it was a few years ago now, but there was this in the news all the time in the media, there was like this reference to the godfathers.
Yeah.
I actually asked ChatGPT at the time, this was a couple of years ago, where are the godmothers of AI? And it replied to me, it's not a commonly referred to term. And there's a reason for that, isn't there? But yeah, I think I've got 2 children. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, it's super grown up, going on 19, and then a 5-year-old son. And the juggle around childcare, I think, is real. I think during school holidays and things, when meetings still take place, I take her along as well. She sits in boardrooms with me. If I'm meeting and, you know, creating a partnership with IBM, for instance, she's been there. She knows what an IBM office now looks like. But there are many other spaces that I take her to as well, or networking sessions. And the challenge for me is I feel so conflicted about that, because that is not equitable access. She's there because I happen to be there, and that yet there's, you know, millions of children just in the UK, but more widely, that never get those opportunities. So how are they ever going to know that these are roles for them? But she comes away from those experiences and she's like, you always talk about this spark on stage, Mummy, about how, like, you know, it's the spark that like sets you on a path. She said, I think I've had my spark. So these moments, at Tech Can we call them moments that matter. They really do matter.
Yeah, and could I first of all, so I agree completely with what Alessandra said, and Claire, what you said. And actually, just to jump on that, so, I mean, I love how you spoke about how we have to start, like, with your daughter and how you started, and I love that, and I think that's so important. And another thing which I think, which you mentioned, Alessandra, about language, I think it's so important when you start young, but you also continue when they're in their teens. Because one thing which I think a huge change which we can make now is inspiring our teens and our iGens to kind of feel in control and take charge. So often, I mean, when we go into the different conferences and different events, sometimes they are open partly to students. But one thing which we've observed and we've noticed is, I mean, when you walk into a stall, the first thing they're going to say, oh, are you a student here? And then you immediately see, like, the teen immediately sees the switch that, okay, and it becomes kind of a power dynamic at play, that someone is superior, they're more experienced, and they're kind of teaching and looking down towards these students who have no experience, they don't know anything. And I think we have to change this. I think that what we have to do is we have to try and make them feel like they are really an equal, that they also have a say in what they're doing. And if we do this, I think gradually all of these young teens, which are young teen girls, are going to kind of take charge and realize, hey, like, I'm in the same level, I have a role here, I can deliberate, and I'm in control. And this feeling of being in control and this feeling of power is something which I feel like as women we often don't get used to. We feel a bit uncomfortable in power, but it's something which, if we start already young, as Claire said, and if we start and continue and propel this when they're a teen, I think that can make a huge impact in diversity for tech in the future.
Can I just add one more practical thing? I agree with all of that, but one other practical thing we've done, although I agree on the social mobility bit and feeling a little bit conflicted sometimes, is we now have an annual Bring Your Child to Work Day, which is awesome. It's complete chaos, so in full disclosure. So basically, lots of people were like, actually, I want my kids to see where I work and what I do, and it's not always that easy. And it's kind of grown legs. So now we have all our demos, quite a lot of tech. Bring your kids in. We do talks about what we do. We have like virtual reality games. So we end up with like 100, and I think we had 120 last time. We had to sort of cap it because we're like, there's only so many people we can cope with. But just even things like that, it's just really inspirational to do it. And also the pride on mums and dads' faces of bringing their kids in and having them in the office. And it's just the highlight of the year, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's take your daughter or take your child to work days. 30 odd years ago, my dad was a telco engineer, I think at Verizon or BT at the time. And I was year 8, 12 years old. And he said to my school, can I take Claire and some friends along to take your daughter to work day? And randomly, it was my cooking teacher, my home economics teacher, that took me and like a few friends. And I remember that is one of the moments that matter that I often reference in my keynotes. That is a moment that set me on a path. And I thought, wow, it's the first time I'd been in a workplace. I saw floors and floors of this building filled with equipment and cables. And I was like, what are you doing? I want to be here. And if it wasn't for opportunities like that, then I wouldn't necessarily have been set on the paths that I've been set on. But they are not open to everyone. Yeah, exactly. And that is the challenge. And so I think it comes back to that question of scale. We all know what works. How do we make this available for everybody?
I'd like to launch a challenge for all of us and for our audience. Every time you bring one of our kids into our working environment, or one of our friends' working environment, which are those amazing places, pair them with the kids from the same school for an underprivileged background. Because for me, as a mentor or a tutor that day, having one kid or having two kids, it won't make a difference. If it's more than two, it will be a little bit different. But one or two, it doesn't make a difference. For the underprivileged one, it will be a huge opportunity, because he will learn from his friends, and he will be exposed to something that his family doesn't even understand how to conceive.
That's so true. All of you have talked about stories about bringing your kids to work. I have a teenage son who is very much into STEM, but wasn't always into STEM. Seeing mom and dad in their workplace, getting to play at Take Your Child to Work Day, getting to see how we operate, sitting in on meetings has really changed and transformed kind of the possibility space, right? Today, he's going to business and entrepreneurship conferences as a high school student, pitching ideas for new technology and new apps that he can develop. And this is a boy, but I've had the same experiences with my nieces. And so I think it is really important for us to create role models and spaces where people can see the possibilities of the future. Now, as we talked about, none of the roles that we're in and none of the careers we're in are likely to be the careers of the future. So we've got to continue to challenge ourselves and the next generation to keep up their skills. As you think about building role models and mentorship and access, and then thinking about how you continue to challenge people who are in the workplace to continue to develop personally and professionally, what are some techniques you've seen work well, and what are some things that we should shy away from?
Who wants to?
Okay, sure. So I think one of the techniques, and we've spoken about this, but what works well is really connecting theory to reality. Okay, connecting whatever you're saying. Okay, you should get into or you should do in the workspace, and connecting it to this is what you will actually do. That I think that works quite well. Another thing in workshop for me, which we've actually tried out, is we noticed that when we started a new session, then we would have a 50-50 of boys and girls. But then after a year or so, the brothers of these girls would stay and their sisters would drop out. And we were like, why is this happening? So what we actually did is we had a dedicated all-girls session. And I mean, we were two ways about it, because it can really go two ways. And we realized that then they felt somehow comfortable and they felt safe. So that's something which we realized. But then after they had that kind of time and some time together, then we re-injected them back into this kind of mixed session, and we saw that they stayed. So for us, that worked really well. The fact that, first of all, they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they know all of their peers. For 2 years, they've only worked with girls, and then they get re-injected and they feel comfortable, because we noticed that there was some type of hesitation they felt. Something which didn't work so well, which we felt with, was in just closing off all of our sessions and making a hard limit to only have 50 girls and 50% boys. If more boys signed up, we realized that it would be better to take them instead of filling up just those girls, because we realized that the boys who actually were able to get into our session kind of had a bit of a different attitude towards the girls, because they think that they didn't get there because they deserved it, but they got there because we had this kind of 50-50 policy, you could say. So that's something which we tried, but then we decided to change. So yeah, that's what we learned.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of buckets of what works well, isn't there? There's the kind of the practical and the aspirational and the role modeling and all of that. So I think for us at Tech She Can, our free schools program is called Tech We Can, and that is intentional because it's for boys and for girls. And it just doesn't put the girls off, simply. For the boys, when we started Tech She Can, there's a whole piece of research that we did around, we asked the boys at primary and at junior school age, what do you think the girls in your class will be when they grow up? Overwhelmingly, they said, well, they're going to be mummies. And so there's a piece to be done around allyship, even at primary and junior school age. And so they are joining these mass live assemblies. They are joining these experiences. They are having women role models and men role models going physically into their classrooms. They are part of it, and they are seeing that actually there's a space for women in these jobs, just like there's a space for men. So I think working with the boys and the teachers as well as the girls is really important. Practically, when we host our Career Insight Days in the offices of our partner organisations, there's all sorts of practical considerations because we intentionally choose to invite and hand select, working with local authorities, working with teachers beforehand, who are the children that need this experience the most. So there's all sorts of practical experiences, practical considerations around, religion, culture, their sense of belonging when they get into the workplace. How are they going to get there? We pay for all of the buses. We backfill and cover and pay to cover the teachers' time because the teachers will be away from those schools. And these are schools that, they've had no enrichment experience. They've had no day trips. They've had nothing. They've had no visitor, probably for 4 years since COVID. And so they're big asks. So you have to make it seamless, free, easy for these schools to say yes to it. But actually, it can't just be one-off. And I think I mentioned before, it has to be sustainable. So from 5 years all the way through to 16, these schools and these children, these cohorts, they grow up with us. They hear from us repeatedly. So, it might be joining a live lesson one term, then they'll have a champion go and visit, maybe somebody from Ericsson, and then they'll go and do a Career Insight Day, maybe at Octopus Energy or Deutsche Bank or whatever. And so regularly they are seeing that these opportunities exist for them.
Let me ask one final question to all the panelists, because I've been given the reminder about our time being up. What is the one thing you would love for this audience to take away in terms of action that we individually as well as collectively can take to change the dynamic of women and youth pursuing STEM careers?
So I think for me, there is nothing that will not have technology in it in future. So there is no job that anyone will do that doesn't have an element of technology. Therefore, if you don't understand it, actually it's going to really hold you back. So I think the thing for me is be really conscious about the use cases that we use, the way we talk about it, because actually the more we integrate theatre, sport, creative writing into it, actually the more people you're involved. So I think it's all about consciousness when you're thinking about your team, your use cases, how you talk about it, just being conscious.
There is a shared responsibility that we'll all have. Doesn't matter if you are a woman or a man. Don't just mentor, but sponsor a women's career. So be able and capable to stand up and push our career forward. Only if we are active in those very specific way of supporting women's career, then we can really make a difference. So it's not just about us, it's about how many women we bring along in the journey and what you really do to enable those career growth.
Well, on that note, thank you to all the panelists here for taking time out of your day, sharing some very practical considerations and tips for what we collectively can do. I hope you leave here truly inspired to drive change so that we can be successful in every career that is technology and digitally enabled in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. That was fabulous. I do hope every time I hear one of these sessions, and this group was extraordinary, about what we should be doing, how we should be driving more young women, but young people into STEM, and thinking about the diversity that really needs to be a part of the economy that we're trying to create and the world we're trying to create. Thank you all for taking the time to make this summit a part of your experience at the show. We really appreciate it. I want to give one more shout out, the GSMA Voice Initiative. If you see this QR code around, please take the time to complete the survey. This is gathering primary data associated with some of the demographics that are here at the show, what your role is. Help the association better understand what is the differences and diversity that is attending this show. We have a great deal of opportunity. There's more than 100,000 of you. So please, let's try to gather some data. So if you see this, please take a few minutes to fill out the survey. And thank you once again. Please keep diversity, inclusion, and equity in your mind. It's a critical activity that we all need to do every day. Thank you again for making this a part of your time.
So, I am Marjana El Arad, and I come from France, Paris. Both my parents quit school at the age of 14 years old. I attended a school in an underprivileged neighborhood. My mom was a cleaner at that school. One day, I was waiting for her to go home while she was cleaning the stairs. One of the teachers stopped with the other pupils, and he looked at me and my mom, and he said, "Marjana has the best grades of her class." How surprising it is coming from the daughter of a cleaner. By the look on his face, I could understand that I was supposed to be ashamed. A few years later, I thought about it again, and I realized that the pupils who were behind him were also from an underprivileged background. So what he told us all was that it was not normal for us to have good grades. It was not normal for us to dream big. It took me years later on to understand and to accept that, yes, I am intelligent, and that, yes, I can dream big. I can become whoever I want to be. I realized that my experience at university was definitely not the same as the others' experience. There's no room for failure. I have to get the best grades. I need to get that internship. I need to work alongside with my studies so that I can afford rent and the bills and stuff. When I was doing babysitting, I would always go there properly dressed and ready to pitch myself so that I could get an internship. That's actually how I got my first internship. I recently got promoted as a senior consultant. I learned that my partner advocated for me, genuinely made me feel seen. When I was working on one of my missions, I was the only one who realized that we were overlooking one of the most important factors of the public policy we were working on. And I did see those things because of my social background. That's when I saw that my social background was not only not something to be ashamed of, but it could also be something that would add value to my work and to my team.